The cold, white fluorescent light swept across the check-in hall like indifferent blades. The airport loudspeakers pulsed with a steady, soulless beat. Passengers moved with the current, suitcase wheels grinding against the stone floor, the hurried sighs of transcontinental flights. At the priority counter, everything suddenly came to a halt. A pale hand, nails painted red, lifted high. In it was a dark blue passport. The name Amara Whitfield was printed clearly on the opening page. A tearing sound rang out. Rip, a dry, brief sound, yet enough to cleave the air in two. Shreds of paper fell onto the counter like the wings of a broken bird, wavering before skittering to the floor. The woman in the airline uniform, Greta Vogel, smiled. A smile that never reached her eyes. It was sharp as a blade, cold as metal. "No flight for you today," her voice drew out, laced with mockery. Amara stood still. Her silhouette reflected in the clear glass behind the counter. Her face was eerily calm, as if that glass had reflected countless humiliations she had endured. Those around her stopped. An older man, tugging a suitcase, looked up, his eyes aghast. A college student held up his phone, his fingers trembling as he hit the record button. No one spoke a word. Greta tilted her head, flicking the passport, now reduced to scraps, with a fingertip. Documents, identity, the right to leave or to remain had become nothing but a pile of paper trash on the counter. "You people always cause trouble." The sentence dropped like a stone into still water, leaving cold ripples behind. Amara drew a slow breath. Her chest rose and fell, but her voice did not shake. "Do you know what you've just done? I have the right to travel like anyone else." Greta let out a derisive laugh. Her finger pressed the red button to call security. "She's aggressive, the usual type." She said it not only for Amara's benefit, but for the entire crowd behind her. An invisible label had just been slapped onto Amara. Disruptive, dangerous. Amara did not lower her head. Her eyes lifted, locking straight onto the lens recording from her own phone. She whispered, just loud enough for herself, yet enough to chill every future viewer. "I'm recording." In that instant, amid the packed hall, no one spoke, no one moved. Only the scattered passport fragments remained, lying like evidence. The red margins on the ticket, SECCK, looked like cuts across flesh. A question quietly burrowed into the witnesses' hearts. Can a country be torn from the edge of a piece of paper? The sound of tearing still echoed in memory, like a wound not yet closed. Amara did not bend to pick up the fragments of her passport. She left them where they were, as if letting the truth indict itself. The crowd thinned, half afraid, half curious. The eyes fixed on her were not the eyes of fellow travelers, but of those watching from behind an invisible pane of glass. A pane at once transparent and dividing. A memory stirred. Amara, 10 years old. Kennedy Airport. Her mother stood at the customs desk, holding an old passport with a frayed spine. The immigration officer tilted the paper beneath the light. The beam revealed the tiny threads. He smirked. "This looks no different from a fake." Her mother pressed her lips together. Her hand gripped Amara's, a quiet squeeze. And in that tense moment, she bent down, whispering, "Never let them teach you to be silent." Amara never forgot. That sentence cut through time, now resounding in the Frankfurt Hall. The polished glass wall behind her reflected an inheritance, rejection, yet also a reminder of dignity. The present. She drew a breath, adjusted the deep navy blazer on her shoulders. On her wrist, a Swiss watch ticked evenly, each second one step closer to gate 42. In her suitcase, not just clothes or papers, but a contract worth millions. A week of grueling negotiations, meetings past midnight, and at last a victory won. Today should have been a day of triumphant return. Instead, she was halted like a stranger, red-marked as a risk. Greta Vogel, her face tilted behind the counter, did not attempt to hide her contempt. She whispered to a colleague, not bothering to lower her voice. "Another one with a priority ticket who doesn't deserve it." The words sliced through like a thin blade, but deep. Those in line behind heard, and suspicion immediately fastened onto Amara. That invisible wall of glass thickened again. Amara laid her passport and first-class ticket on the counter. Greta's fingers hesitated, as though touching the paper itself was repulsive. "First class?" she asked, dragging the syllables with suspicion. Amara answered briefly, steadily, "Platinum member." New York. Each word dropped like a stone on water. Calm, certain. But Greta did not stop. She turned each passport page longer than necessary. "Business trip," her tone casting a shadow of doubt. Amara met her gaze, unblinking. "Yes, closing a deal with Heimler Technologies." Behind the line began to stir. People rolled their eyes, sighed. A few shook their heads slightly, as if Amara was slowing the world. Meanwhile, a white passenger stepped forward. Ticket scanned. The passport was flipped once. "Have a safe journey, sir." Not even 10 seconds. Meanwhile, Greta's fingers kept tapping on the keyboard. The screen's glow burned in her eyes like red fire. She entered one word into the system, SECCK. Those red strokes stamped not only the ticket, but human dignity itself. Amara pressed her lips tight. The childhood image returned, her mother's hand, the warning not to be silent. But a decade in boardrooms held her steady. Silence is not surrender. Silence can be the first step of a counterattack. She took back the ticket with its haunting red scar and pulled her suitcase along. The fluorescent lights still shone. But within Amara, another light had just switched on, the light of memory and resolve. The PA chimed, "Gate 42, boarding in 90 minutes. The flight to New York awaited." But before setting foot on it, Amara would walk another journey, not in the skies, but here in this place, where a red pen, a contemptuous smile, and the rip of paper had pressed into the wound of an entire community. The waiting area at Gate 42 grew steadily more crowded. The loudspeakers droned, calling out the names of flights linking continents. People sat packed together, their eyes glued to phones, headphones playing music, while parents soothed crying children. Everything seemed ordinary, until one name cut through the air. "Passenger Whitfield, please approach the desk." Amara lifted her head. 2 security officers stood by the counter, shoulders rigid, eyes fixed directly on her. Beside them, Greta, uniform pressed sharp, lips painted a blazing red, her arm stretched out, finger stabbing toward Amara. A fleeting moment, but enough for every nearby passenger to turn at once. 100 needles of sight pierce Amara. She rose to her feet. Each slow step echoed, her heels striking the cold stone floor. The waiting hall sank into a heavy silence, broken only by the rattling wheels of her suitcase behind her. "What seems to be the matter?" Her voice was calm. "Random security check," one officer answered, eyes sliding away, ustusle, almost apologetic. Greta folded her arms, leaning against the desk. "Standard procedure, unless, of course, you've got something to hide." Her words fell like a sentence passed. Amara was led to a side area, separate but not discreet. No curtain. No private room. Just a bare table in the center of hundreds of curious stares. Her suitcase was open. Each item was dragged out and placed upon the table. A neatly pressed suit, a small cosmetic bag, a thick notebook, and a slim laptop sealed with her company's security tag. Greta stepped forward, eyes glinting like a predator catching scent of blood. Laptop, open it. We need to see emails and documents to verify you really are an executive. The sneer packed into that word made the space contract. Amara met her gaze. No, these are confidential. I have a duty to protect my company's secrets. Convenient excuse, Greta replied, instantly shrugging. Then she turned deliberately toward the crowd, raising her voice. See, people who have something to hide always refuse. The eyes pressing down on Amara multiplied, heavier and heavier. Phones were raised discreetly, recording. Whispers spread like smoke. Maybe she is suspicious. Looks like a businesswoman, but who can tell? Amara clenched both fists. She remembered her mother. She remembered the warning, never let them teach you to be silent. But this time, silence was not a sign of weakness. It was armor. Just then, a white man stepped up to the counter. In his hand, a thick passport stamped with dozens of entries. The officer scanned it, less than 10 seconds, then smiled. Have a safe flight, sir. Amara watched, eyes unblinking. On the one hand, the procedure was merely a formality. On the other hand, the procedure became shackles. Her voice rose, not loud, but enough for many to hear. Why am I being held back while he walks through? We both carry international passports. The only difference is skin color. Greta turned back, lips curving into a cold smile. Don't be difficult. I've been doing this job for 15 years. I know when there's a problem. She tapped her nails on the table, clack, 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 like a gavel striking. Care to explain why your passport has 12 entry stamps in a single year? Someone like you. What reason could you have to travel so much? Someone like you. The words hung in the air, heavy as lead. The crowd rustled. Some faces tightened. Others bowed their heads, unwilling to be involved. Only a handful of phones continued recording quietly, but no one dared speak. Greta shoved the laptop toward Amara. If you really are an executive, prove it. Open it. Show the emails, show the contracts, prove you belong in first class. Amara lifted the laptop. Her finger brushed the security seal. One deep breath. Then she set it down again. No. The answer was clipped, final, like a blade slicing the air in two. Greta scoffed. The perfect excuse. No proof, no identity. What we have here is an imposter. She raised the passport high. The fluorescent light shone through its spine. Look here, loose binding, classic sign of forgery. Before Amara could react, Greta gripped it with both hands. Pulled. A shrill tear split the air. Rip. Papers scattered. The page with the national seal fluttered to the floor, trampled beneath hurried shoes. A dense silence smothered the hall. Amara froze. Her identity, her right to move, her very self, shredded in a single gesture. Greta shrugged, her voice pitched to carry across the crowd. Oops, looks like a fake. Genuine passports don't fall apart. A short laugh. Cold as steel. Amara drew in a deep breath. She felt every cell in her body trembling. A burning humiliation scorched her chest. But when her voice emerged, it was steady, low, resonant. You have just destroyed my legal documents. I am recording, and I will submit this to the authorities. Greta slammed the red button on the desk. Security. Passenger attempting to use a forged passport. Red lights flashed. A storm was gathering. Amara bent down, gathering the shredded pieces, as if collecting the fragments of her own dignity. Her hands shook, but her eyes did not. She lifted her head, looked at Greta, looked at the crowd, looked at the raised phones still recording, and spoke, slow, deliberate, each word carved in stone. "I will not be silent, not this time." The silence fractured into a wave of murmurs. Some faces flushed with shame. Some eyes lit up, as though glimpsing something larger than a passport. And Greta, she faltered for an instant, tongue-tied, before scrambling to cover. "Try explaining that to the police. With that shredded passport, you'll be stuck here for weeks. Good luck." But Amara did not move. She slipped the last torn piece into her pocket and laid her hand over her phone. In her steady gaze, a light flashed. The fury had transformed into something else. A cold, sharp blade pointed at the truth. The fragments of her passport lay in her hands, twisted, tattered, like an inheritance trampled underfoot. Amara gathered them one by one, as gently as if she were collecting pieces of her own soul. Around her, the terminal remained noisy. But within the small circle where she stood, time thickened. Every gaze clung to her, not with empathy, but with curiosity, with judgment. Someone whispered, "She must be trouble." Another muttered, "Black, always a problem." Amara did not react. She folded the scraps tight into her palm and stepped out of the ring, like a woman who had decided she would not be swallowed whole. In the corner of the hall, beneath a sickly yellow light, she found a row of metal seats. Cold. Silent. Her back reflected faintly in the glass wall behind her. She set down her suitcase, drew a long breath. Her trembling hand rested on her phone. The screen lit up, reflecting her face, patient, weary, but unbroken. Amara did not dial the police. Did not call the embassy. She opened her contacts and chose only one name, Leon Hart. The screen flashed calling. She pressed the phone to her ear. A single ring. Then a deep male voice answered, firm, without introduction. "Amara." She closed her eyes, lowered her voice so no one nearby could hear. "Leon, and I need to activate Beacon, Frankfurt, Gate 42. My passport has been torn." Silence hung on the line for a beat. Then a heavy sigh. "I understand. Do you have evidence?" Amara glanced down at her second phone, the recording still running. She replied, "Yes, video, witnesses, and the fragments are here." "Good. Stay in place. Don't reveal your identity. I'll deploy immediately." "And Leon," her voice slowed, "I want to see how far they'll go before the truth emerges." Another pause. Then the CEO's voice came hard as iron. "Understood. I'll dispatch Captain Richter to the gate. The legal team will also be engaged. Hold steady. This is the moment we set Beacon in stone." Amara ended the call. No one around her knew whom she had just spoken to. Only the throb of her heartbeat filled her chest, steady, powerful. She reached into her bag, drew out a black fountain pen. Etched on its body was the logo of North Star Holdings. A gift to mark the day she was named Global Chief Operating Officer. She uncapped it and began to write. Not on clean sheets, but in a worn brown notebook, the one she had carried since her early days, a young employee full of doubt. Line after line appeared. Arrow 833, Greta Vogel, marked SECCK, without reason. At 847, forced public inspection. Laptop, documents, and personal items were exposed before a crowd. At 855, passport deliberately torn, accompanied by the sneer, "Fake passports don't fall apart." At 857, witnesses recorded. The crowd remained silent. The words did not shake. They were neat, precise, like an official report. She wrote not only for herself. She wrote for the thousands who had been pulled aside for random checks simply because they looked different. She wrote for the sighs in silence, for the averted eyes. The airport loudspeaker suddenly boomed, making Amara look up. "Captain Klaus Richter, please report to Gate 42, immediately." Passengers stirred. Some glanced at each other, whispering, "Why would a captain be summoned before boarding?" Greta, chatting with a colleague, froze. A faint crease crossed her face. Then, quickly, she smoothed her hair and straightened her uniform tie, forcing herself to remain composed. Amara saw it all. A faint smile brushed her lips. Not a smile of victory, but the smile of someone who knows the storm has just begun. While waiting, she kept writing. Every word, every glance, every gesture, carved into the stone of evidence. Another memory rose. She was 15, traveling with her class for the first time. All her white classmates breezed through immigration with a quick scan. She and two black friends were pulled aside. The officer asked, "Do you really study at this school, on scholarship?" Amara had lowered her head then, ashamed and silent. Her mother wasn't there to remind her. No one in her class spoke up. But now it was different. This time, she would not be silent. Her phone buzzed with a new message. From Leon Hart, Legal Team ETA 15. Richter en route. Hold strong. Amara set down her pen. She closed the notebook and sat upright. In the crowd, a few eyes still watched her. Some began whispering. "Looks like she knows someone important. Probably just bluffing." Amara did not react. Her silence was no longer a defense. It had become a weapon. In that moment, she caught her reflection in the vast pane of glass opposite. A black woman, 34, clad in a deep navy blazer, clutching the fragments of a torn passport. She looked straight into her own eyes in the glass. No longer the little girl humiliated by border agents. No longer was the student isolated among her white classmates. This was Amara Whitfield, the woman who had closed a deal with Europe's leading tech firm and who now stood ready to negotiate a just battle on behalf of millions of passengers. The sound of hurried footsteps thundered at the far end of the hall. The crowd parted. A navy blue uniform emerged, golden epaulets bearing 4 stripes. Klaus Richter, a veteran captain, strode forward. Each step is firm. His cold gaze swept across the counter. The waiting hall fell utterly silent. Every eye turned to Gate 42. Greta swallowed hard, but stepped forward to greet him. "Captain, thank God you're here. We have a passenger with fraudulent documents. I followed the procedure to the letter." Amara rose. She held her suitcase in one hand, her notebook and passport fragments in the other. No words needed. Only her eyes. Richter looked at her, then at Greta. He did not reply immediately. He drew out his radio, his voice low and firm. "Security, I need access to gate footage, now." The hall stirred again. An invisible wave swept through, carrying the sense that the old order was about to break. Amara closed her eyes. Her mother's whisper echoed, "Never let them teach you to be silent." She had been silent long enough. Now this silence, chosen, deliberate, together with evidence and memory, would become the fiercest accusation. A beam of white light from the window cut into the hall, glittering across the torn passport fragments still scattered on the floor. They looked like shards of a mirror, reflecting an entire system's rot. Amara knew the storm had not yet begun, but the thunder had already sounded. Captain Richter's radio crackled through the heavy silence, his voice low and commanding. "Gate 42, please send me the last 20 minutes of surveillance. Now." The order was sharp, decisive. No debate. No doubt. the command of a man accustomed to holding the lives of hundreds aloft in the sky. Greta forced a strained smile. "Captain, with all due respect, I only followed procedure. This woman," she jabbed her finger at Amara, "has been suspicious from the start. I was only doing my job." Richter did not look at her. He turned instead to Amara. "Madam, could you briefly state what just occurred?" Amara inclined her head slightly. Her voice was low, slow, but unmistakably clear. "My passport was deliberately torn, right here. I have a video and witnesses." Greta let out a bitter laugh. "Video? Who believes in chopped-up clips from phones? And witnesses? No one will step forward. They don't understand security protocol." Silence. Heavy. The crowd glanced at one another. Many lowered their eyes, avoiding Amara's gaze. Fear, reluctance, or the simple desire not to be involved. Amara knew this silence well. It was the silence that had trailed her all her life. The silence of the classroom when her classmates mocked her accent. The silence of the boardroom when her ideas were ignored until repeated by a white male colleague. The silence of an entire system. She drew a breath, eyes closed. Never let them teach you to be silent. Her mother's words rang again. She opened her eyes, her voice steady, not loud, yet carrying far. Did anyone here witness it? Is there anyone brave enough to speak the truth? A pause. Then a trembling hand rose. A middle-aged woman, with silver hair and steady eyes. "I saw it. The attendant. She tore the passport, intentionally." Greta spun around, snapping. "You know nothing about aviation security. Stay out of this." But the words had already been spoken. And like a crack in a wall, it opened the way for others. A man's voice rang out from the back rows. "I filmed it too." She pressed the passport hard, then ripped it. "I have the video." A young man raised his phone, its screen glowing bright. On it, Greta's figure was precise, her hands pulling the passport apart. The terminal buzzed with murmurs. Those who had kept silent began whispering among themselves. A few eyes shifted from suspicion to anger. Greta stepped back, her face paling, though she tried to hold her composure. "This is a misunderstanding. Fake documents tear easily. I was only protecting everyone here." But her voice trembled. Gone was the mocking confidence from before. Now it was the defensive tone of someone watching the walls collapse around her. Richter raised a hand, commanding silence. The entire hall held its breath. His voice was deep, steady. "The cameras will confirm, but witnesses have spoken. And what I see here is not procedure, it is behavior." His eyes fixed on Greta, sharp as a blade. "You've forgotten something fundamental. Security does not mean humiliation." Amara sat down, still clutching the shredded passport pieces. Her heart still pounded, but now with hope. The ones who had spoken up were not heroes. They were ordinary passengers. But the truth had forced them out of the shadow of silence. She looked around and saw a young boy staring at her. About 12 years old, his hand was gripping his mother's sleeve. In his eyes, she saw herself, the 10-year-old girl once standing beside her mother at Kennedy, questioned, doubted, for nothing but her skin. The boy looked at her, and she nodded softly. A silent acknowledgement. "You are not alone, I was there too." A security officer returned, tablet in hand. "Captain, footage from the check-in counter." Richter took it, watched a few seconds, then turned the screen outward. The blue glow lit every face. On the screen, clear, undeniable, Greta flipped the passport, paused, then pulled hard with both hands. The tearing sound filled the speakers. A gasp swept the crowd. Greta stumbled back another step. "Video. It doesn't show the full context. I only..." Richter cut her off. Enough. You will explain yourself in an office, not in front of a crowd. Here the truth is already clear. He turned to Amara. Madam, I apologize for this ordeal. Please wait in the operations room. Legal representatives will arrive shortly. Soft clapping rose from a corner of the hall, at first scattered, then growing. Not everyone, but enough to swell into a sound that carried weight. Amara stood, not bowing her head, not trembling. She stepped out of the circle of humiliation Greta had drawn around her. And now that circle was broken. As Amara passed Greta, she paused. Their eyes locked. One filled with anger, trembling. The other, calm, unwavering. Amara did not speak loudly. Just enough for Greta to hear. You tore my papers, but in doing so, you ripped away the mask covering this entire system. Greta opened her mouth, but no words came. Because all around, the crowd had begun to look at her differently. Not with unspoken sympathy, but with judgment. Amara walked toward the operations room with Captain Richter. Each step shed an invisible chain. Around her, phones chimed with alerts, the videos already spreading beyond Frankfurt, ready to ignite a fire. And deep inside, Amara knew this battle had only just begun. The door to the operations room closed behind Amara. The noise of the waiting hall vanished, replaced only by the click of the electronic lock. The room was square, its walls a cold grey, the fluorescent lights pale and sickly, the long table topped with dull steel like the surface of an interrogation chamber. Amara set down her suitcase, still clutching the torn fragments of her passport. Across from her, Greta. Her face had lost the sheen of confident lipstick, replaced now with a stiffness edged with worry. At the head of the table, Captain Klaus Richter sitting upright, hands resting on a folder. Beside him, a woman in a black suit, laptop already open. Helena Vogt, legal department. The air stretched taut, like a violin string drawn too tight. Greta folded her arms, trying to recover her poise. Captain, I am prepared to submit my report. This passenger presented a fraudulent passport and— Enough. Richter cut her off, his voice like the slam of an iron door. He turned to Helena. Begin the record. Helena tapped at the keyboard. The sound of the keys was steady, like a clock ticking off each heavy second. Richter looked at Amara. Madam, please recount the events from the beginning. Amara laid each passport fragment on the table, arranging them neatly, like evidence before a court of law. Her voice was slow, clear, without a wasted word. Valid passport, first-class ticket, presented according to procedure. Instead of verifying, Amara's eyes flicked towards Greta, delayed, doubted, and finally tore my document to shreds in front of hundreds of passengers. She unlocked her phone and slid it across the table. Here, images, audio, witnesses. She laughed. She said, fake passports don't fall apart. Helena leaned closer to examine the screen. Her brows knit together. This recording is clear enough to serve as evidence. Greta shot to her feet, nearly shouting, videos are easy to manipulate. I was doing my job. If the passport tore, it was because of poor quality. People like you, the words people like you slipped from her tongue, falling into a silence that turned deadly. Even she realized her mistake. Amara sat motionless, raising only one brow. Richter set his pen down on the table with a crack that reverberated. Ms. Vogel, do you recall Regulation 47 in the security manual? Any suspicious documents must be preserved intact and handed to the authorities. Destruction is strictly prohibited. Greta's face flushed red. She stammered, Captain, I may have been a bit heavy-handed, but I acted for the greater good. She? Helena cut in, her gaze sharp as a knife. But, sir, This woman is a lawful passenger. Your words alone are enough to establish a record of discrimination. Greta gaped, turning to Richter in search of an ally. But the captain only studied Amara in silence, as if weighing something deeper. A soft knock at the door. A young staffer entered, carrying a tablet. Footage from the check-in counter, Captain. The screen glowed. The image played, Greta flipping the passport, pausing, then pulling hard. The rip echoed, ice-cold. Undeniable. Greta collapsed back into her chair, lips trembling. That was just a reflex, part of inspection. Helena snapped her laptop shut, her tone sharp as a verdict, then explained the 17 prior complaints, all involving passengers of color. The room seemed to grow colder. Greta blanched, her face drained of blood. Those complaints, they were misunderstandings. No one ever proved anything. Helena dropped a thick file on the table. Now we can internal data. Statistics show you marked SECCK 3 times more often than your colleagues. For African and Asian passengers, numbers don't lie. Amara remained silent. Her hands folded, her gaze calm. Her silence tilted the room, as though the weight of truth had shifted everything to her side. Richter quietly pulled out his phone and scanned a new message. His eyes widened slightly, then hardened, and he spoke slowly, firmly. Someone is coming. Someone who insists on being part of this session. Greta's head snapped up. Who? Union? I have the right to representation. Richter did not answer. The door opened. An older man entered, silver-haired, imposing. A dark blue suit, a silver-grey tie. Helena immediately stood. Mr. Leon Hart. The atmosphere shifted at once, as if a strong wind had blown the walls open. Greta stared, bewildered. You, the CEO? Leon Hart did not look at her. He looked straight at Amara. Their eyes met, recognition without need of words. Amara set her fountain pen on the table. The click rang out, light yet resonant. That pen, emblem of North Star Holdings. The room fell silent. Greta blinked rapidly. Wait, what is happening? Why is the CEO here? Who is she really? Amara did not answer at once. She turned the pen in her fingers, the metal catching the pallid light. Then her voice came, low, steady, cutting through the gloom like a scalpel. I am not just a passenger. I am the Global Chief Operating Officer of North Star Holdings. The company has just acquired Atlantic Global Airways. Each word dropped like a stone into water, rippling outward. Greta froze. Helena kept writing. Richter leaned back slightly, his eyes half surprised, half respectful. Amara bent, gathering the torn passport fragments. She whispered, but the words carried in the cold room. You can tear my papers, but you cannot tear away the truth. And the truth is, today, this entire system has unmasked itself. Greta stammered. I didn't know. I couldn't know you were... Amara raised her head, her gaze sharp as a blade. Exactly, you didn't know. And that is why you believed you had the right to humiliate me. Leon Hart placed a hand on Amara's shoulder, his eyes grave, heavy. It is time this board was overturned. Not just for you, Amara, but for every passenger who has endured in silence. He turned to Richter and Helena. Record everything. This is no longer an isolated incident. This is a systemic violation. Greta slumped into her chair. No more protests. No more excuses. Only ragged breaths, like someone watching the walls collapse around her. Amara closed her eyes. She saw again the boy in the waiting hall, his gaze fixed silently on her. She thought, this is for you, for all who never had a voice. The white screen on the table glowed, recording every word, every look, every moment. A new board had been set. And this time, Amara held the Queen. The white glow of the laptop screen washed over every face in the room. Helena switched on the recording mode, her voice striking like a gavel against the bench. This session is being recorded as official evidence. Every word spoken here carries legal weight. Greta flinched. Both hands darted into her lap as if to hide their trembling. But it was too late. Every eye in the room bore down on her, like stage lights stripping a figure bare. Helena flipped through the file. In the past 18 months, there have been 17 complaints lodged against you, all from minority passengers. Most of them were closed without investigation. Today, your actions have been captured on camera and corroborated by witnesses. How do you explain this? Greta bit her lip, her voice cracking. That's only a coincidence. I process many passengers. Of course, there will be complaints. People are always sensitive about security questions. Richter tapped his pen against the steel table, each strike resounding like a hammer. Security is not an excuse to tear a passport. I've flown for 30 years, and I've never seen anyone call that procedure. Greta flushed, forcing a brittle smile. Perhaps I was too strict, but I only... Helena cut in, her voice sharp. You weren't only strict. You targeted, and your targets were always black women, immigrants, and Asians. Do you swear you treat all passengers equally? Silence. Greta could not force a word out. Sweat broke across her brow. Amara sat still, hands clasped atop the cold steel table. She did not interject. She didn't need to. The truth was flowing on its own. A river breaching its banks, sweeping away every excuse. Leon Hart leaned back, observing like an old general watching the pieces fall into place. He only spoke when Greta clutched for her final defense. I never meant harm. I was only acting on instinct. I didn't think about skin color. Leon leaned forward, his voice low, resonant, final. And that is exactly the problem. When you claim not to think about color, it is still the first thing you see. And you let it decide how you treat people. That is called unconscious bias. But when it repeats 17 times, it is no longer unconscious. It is systemic. Greta went pale. Helena projected the witness video onto the large screen. The sound of tearing filled the room. Greta's face appeared on the footage, smiling as she ripped Amara's passport. A smile sharp as a blade. The room went utterly still. That sound, the cold rip, had become irrefutable evidence. Helena looked Greta straight in the eye. Do you wish to amend your statement before this record is submitted? Greta's breath came hard, her eyes rimmed red. She let her hands drop. I only thought she didn't belong in first class. I couldn't stand the way she looked at me, as if she had a right to be there. The confession slipped out, fragile yet thunderous. No further words were needed. In that instant, Greta herself exposed the root, the prejudice entrenched, clearer than any document. Amara remained silent, but in her eyes shone steady resolve. Not joy, not revenge, but affirmation. She had seen the truth reveal itself. Richter leaned back, his voice heavy as lead. Ms. Vogel, you have just admitted to discriminatory conduct on record. You understand the consequences, don't you? Greta slumped in her chair. Her hands covered her face. No more excuses. No more masks. Leon turned to Amara. Do you wish to say anything before we deliver a decision? Amara rose slowly. The small room seemed to echo with her steps, as though she were walking across a great hall. She looked around, her eyes resting on Greta, then fixing firmly on the lens of the recording device. No one among us was born to be humiliated for our appearance. A passport may be torn, but dignity, if we hold it fast, cannot be touched. Her words rang out, deliberate, steady. No one dared breathe too loudly. Helena typed the final line into the record. Richter closed his folder. Leon Hart gave a slight nod, his voice decisive. We have heard enough. A formal decision will be issued in the special session, but effective immediately, Greta Vogel is suspended indefinitely, and this matter will be handed to international investigators. The sound of a pen striking paper echoed like a closing bell. Greta broke into sobs. But no one reached for her. No one defended her. She had once relied on colleagues, on the shelter of a system. But now, before the camera, truth had stripped away every shield. Amara sat again, her hand gently brushing the fragments of her passport. She knew the paper was dead. But from it, something larger had been born. The board of power had turned. The one once forced lowest now stood at the center with the whole system forced to meet her gaze. And she remained silent. Silent, yet that silence thundered like a storm. The 58th floor of Atlantic Global Airways headquarters, Manhattan. The boardroom, long, vast, with a ceiling of glass that stretched endlessly upward, felt unusually cold that morning. Beyond the windows, the city glittered like a labyrinth of steel and glass. Inside, 14 black leather chairs formed a circle around a rosewood table. At its head sat Leon Hart, posture commanding, hands interlocked. Before him lay a folder stamped in red. Frankfurt Incident, Immediate Review. No one in the room touched the water glasses set before them. They all knew this was no routine meeting. This was an earthquake. The door opened. Amara Whitfield entered. No longer the woman humiliated at the check-in counter. No longer the passenger whose passport had been torn before a crowd. Today she wore a crisp black suit, her hair pulled high, her gaze gleaming like sharpened steel. Each step echoed against the wood floor like a drumbeat, announcing the opening of battle. She sat in the seat prepared for her, directly opposite the board. Calm, unbowed. Leon Hart's voice carried, profound and decisive. We convene today not to decide about one employee, but about the entire system of this airline. Mrs. Whitfield, please present your case. Amara opened her tablet. The large screen behind her flickered on, projecting images from Frankfurt. Greta Vogel flipping the passport. The sound of paper tearing. The crowd's gasp of shock. The boardroom shuddered. A few senior directors leaned back, sighing, their eyes lowered. Amara did not raise her voice, but each word cut deep. This was not the first time. Frankfurt was only the breaking point. Over the past 6 months, I have flown 27 international routes as an ordinary passenger. I documented, with video, with data, with witnesses, a bitter truth. Passengers of color are treated differently. The following slide appeared, a graph awash in red. Passengers of color, passports scrutinized 3x more often. Black women, 5x more likely to be flagged with SECCK. 78% of complaints were ignored. A murmur spread across the table. A marketing director exhaled sharply. God, if the press ever gets these numbers. Amara's eyes locked on him. The press already has them. The Frankfurt video is spreading. In 48 hours, it will dominate the networks. The only question is, how will we respond? Will we cover up or will we change? Leon Hart tapped a finger lightly on the table. Solutions? Amara drew a deep breath. She pressed a button. A new slide appeared. The Whitfield Initiative. 5 steps of transformation. Mandatory unconscious bias training for all staff. Launch of a mystery passenger program. Undercover travelers of varied races and nationalities testing the system regularly. Complete overhaul of the complaint process. Creation of an independent board reporting directly to the directors. Passenger equity metrics established as an official KPI for management. Radical transparency, data published publicly, nothing hidden behind closed doors. With each point, the screen displayed supporting numbers. Not slogans, but a plan, tight and precise, like a military campaign. A finance director furrowed his brow. Estimated cost of implementation. Amara did not blink. $22 million in the first year. However, without action, legal fees and settlements are projected to be at least $60 million. Not to mention the brand damage, immeasurable. No one countered. The silence in the room was the silence of those cornered by truth. Another director, voice bitter. You've turned a personal humiliation into a global campaign. Are you seeking to make yourself the face of this airline? Amara raised her head. No, I want passengers of color not to endure humiliation to fly. I want that 12-year-old black child at the check-in counter never to see his mother doubted simply because of her skin. The room froze. No one could meet her eyes. Leon Hart broke the silence. He rose, his voice rolling like thunder. We will debate no further. This is not a choice. This is survival. We either lead reform or our silence buries us. He turned to Amara, his gaze unwavering. The Whitfield initiative will be deployed system-wide, immediately. An invisible gavel struck the table. The earthquake had officially begun. Amara sat still, her chest swelling with memory. She recalled Frankfurt, the rip of the passport, the gaze of the boy in the crowd. Now, on the 58th floor, she understood. Those shattered fragments had become the foundation of reform. Outside the windows, the city still shone. But within this room, history had shifted. Amara whispered, as if to herself, we are not just correcting wrongs, we are rewriting the way the world moves. 1 week after the Manhattan board meeting, the world suddenly shrank around a single 45-second video. On phone screens, computer monitors, billboards in the streets, the same chilling sound cut through everywhere. Rip! Amara's passport was torn apart. Greta's mocking smile. Amara's calm, restrained gaze. The caption on social media. When dignity is torn, truth speaks louder. In Lagos, a teenage girl clutched her phone, tears streaming. Mum, it's just like when they held me at London airport. In Atlanta, a former flight attendant typed with trembling hands. 15 years ago, I witnessed this, but no one believed me. Now it cannot be denied. In Paris, a black politician stood before cameras. This is not about a single passenger. This is about humanity. The right to be respected when we travel. News outlets erupted. CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera. Every frame repeated that tearing sound, stabbing into the hearts of viewers. Atlantic global stock plunged 14% in 2 days. But Leon Hart did not hold a hollow press conference of apology. He appeared beside Amara, eyes blazing beneath the cameras. We will not deny, we will acknowledge, and we will act. He stopped, handed the microphone to Amara. The world held its breath. Her voice flowed, measured, heavy, each word carrying weight. I do not ask for an apology for myself. I ask for a commitment, for all passengers of color, for every woman who has ever doubted simply because she stood in a place others thought she did not belong. A tremor ran through millions of screens. People shared, people commented, people hashtagged Right to Travel, #Whitfield Initiative. The domino effect began. Delta Air, Lufthansa, and Singapore Airlines, one after another, issued statements pledging reviews of their procedures. The German government announced its own investigation. The European Union recommended that destroying passengers' legal documents could constitute an international crime. 3 African nations submitted a joint petition to IATA, the International Air Transport Association, demanding an agenda item on protection of minority passengers. Within 3 months, the fire from Frankfurt had spread across the skies of the world. At international aviation summits, where once only slot allocations, fuel prices and market competition were discussed, new words echoed: dignity metrics. We cannot only measure takeoff times and landings. We must measure how people are treated. At the Singapore Aviation Summit, Amara's voice rang against glass walls, bringing the entire hall to silence. A rival Middle Eastern carrier tried to fight back, declaring, "We have no such problem." The next day, a passenger uploaded a video showing the airline staff scrutinizing a black older woman's passport for 15 minutes, while the European traveler behind her was cleared in 30 seconds. 20 million views. They were forced to issue a statement: "We will adopt the Whitfield model." In a small Brooklyn office, a group of law students hung a poster of Amara, the words beneath it: "She turned paper into power." In Johannesburg, a civil rights group printed her image on banners, marching through airports. "Dignity has no color." In Seoul, a group of young flight attendants launched a workshop titled "Bias Awareness in the Sky." They began with the Frankfurt video. Amara watched it all from her new office, located on the 42nd floor of North Star Tower. New York's night blazed outside the window. She felt no pride, no vanity, only quiet gravity. She knew this movement no longer belonged to her alone. It had leapt beyond her hands, a collective fire. But deep within, she remembered the boy's eyes in Frankfurt. That gaze had been the spark. And she told herself, this fire must not be allowed to die. On the last day of the year, an email arrived from IATA. "We invite Mrs. Amara Whitfield to join the Global Passenger Equality Standards Council." She read slowly, her eyes blurring in the glow of the screen. A year ago, her passport had been torn, her name branded as disruptive. Today, she was being asked to write the global standards. When Amara stepped onto the podium at the United Nations conference, the logo behind her was simple: "Travel with dignity." She looked across the hall, representatives from 92 nations. Her voice rose, steady, deliberate. Dignity must not be the privilege of the few. It must be the standard for all. We can measure the speed of planes, the fuel they burn. But can we measure how a black child is treated at the check-in counter? Today we begin. The applause thundered. Not polite, but the applause of hearts awakening. The fire from Frankfurt had become a global torch. 1 year later. Frankfurt, autumn. The sky is pale grey, rows of maples outside the terminal already turning gold. Amara Whitfield pulled her suitcase across the hall, each step measured, as though she were walking inside her own memory. Here was where her passport had once been torn to shreds. Here was where the laughter of mockery had once echoed. And here was where an entire movement had been ignited. The check-in hall looked different now. No suspicious eyes, no invisible walls. Instead, a large digital board glowed with words in 12 languages. Every passenger deserves dignity. Beneath it, a small QR code, linking to an independent hotline conceived by Amara herself. She stopped, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Change was no longer just written in policy. It was here, alive, in language, in glances, in the air itself. A young attendant approached, bowing politely. "Good morning, Mrs. Whitfield. Frankfurt to New York, first class. May I see your passport?" The voice was gentle, the eyes respectful. The attendant flipped through the pages swiftly, professionally. No suspicion, no dismissive remark. "Thank you for your cooperation. Have a safe journey." Amara received her passport back. "Ist swag." A small gesture, but her heart swelled. She remembered vividly the year before. The same gesture, but replaced with a rip. Today, the passport intact, and with it, a promise. The system itself had changed. In the waiting area, a black boy around 12 tugged at his mother's sleeve. "Mom, look, that's her, the lady from the video." The mother gave an awkward smile, nodding gently toward Amara. "Thank you. Because of you, this trip, I am no longer afraid." Amara bent down, touched the boy's shoulder lightly. "Remember this, you belong anywhere your dreams can carry you." The boy's eyes lit up. That moment, simple, yet greater than any speech. When the announcement rang, Gate 42, boarding now, Amara's heart dipped. Gate 42, the old wound. Today it called her name again. She walked toward it. Everything seemed familiar. The white lights, the rows of chairs, the green carpet. But everything was also new. Staff smiling, greeting in multiple languages. An information board displayed rights of passengers. An independent observer sat quietly in the corner, taking notes on a tablet. Amara felt as if she were stepping into a new world, one born from her own pain. On the plane, she sat by the window. Below, the runways stretched endlessly. As the engines roared, Amara closed her eyes, drawing a deep breath. She thought of Greta, the woman who had torn her passport. The last she had heard, Greta worked at a small shop now. No planes, no passports. Only goods and a checkout counter. Amara did not hate her. For she understood what mattered was not the downfall of one individual, but the awakening of a system. 3 months later, Amara stood before the Global Aviation Conference. She presented her report. Discrimination-related complaints down by 68%. More than 27 airlines had adopted the Whitfield initiative. 8 nations had passed new laws to protect passengers. The hall rose in applause. Not only for Amara, but for the people who had spoken up, who had shared the video, who had turned outrage into action. Late at night, back at her small Brooklyn apartment, Amara removed her blazer and placed her passport on the table. She gazed at the blue cover, fingers tracing the embossed seal. Not because it proved where she could go, but because it reminded her dignity does not reside in papers. Dignity lives in how we defend it, every day, every moment. The story had begun with a torn passport. But it did not end with scraps. It ended, and at the same time began anew with a rewritten truth. No one has the right to tear away your place in this world. Amara closed her eyes, whispering, "True power is not in the hands that tear, but in the voices that rebuild."